First question, the Philippines has successfully sent resupply to our Marines in BRP Sierra Madre. Do you think this is due to the megaphone diplomacy or the quiet diplomacy that took place?
The Philippines is resupplying our troops already in the Sierra Madre station at the Second Thomas Shoal or the Ayungin Shoal. I think for me, no, I think it's all about the quiet diplomacy because from the post, the FB, no, Facebook post of Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, he said that for few days or more than or several days he was silently and quietly negotiating with the ambassador of China to the Philippines about the situation, and thus far it was successful. And I think that's why we have already, the area is quiet and tranquil, and at the same time our troops have been supplied already with the necessary goods that they need, and for them to be able to do their own thing, whatever they're doing in the area. So I think it's much more the quiet diplomacy, as per Secretary Delfin Lorenzana post on FB. No?
A related question from one of our audience also is, you mentioned that this resupplying has been going on for if not years, decades, no? So Professor Banlaoi or Professor Malindog, can you give us a bit of a history? Why do we have the BRP Sierra Madre there?
Yes. It happened when I was still working at the Department of National Defense during the time of Secretary Orlando Mercado. It was intentionally dropped there in order to strengthen Philippine foothold in the Second Thomas Shoal, because China is already strengthening its presence in Mischief Reef, which is just a stone throw away from Ayungin Shoal. So our intention was to really establish our presence in Ayungin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal in the late 1990s. I think between 1997 to 1998 to 1999. That was the.
It was on 1999, I think.
Yeah.
1999.
So during that time, and I remember I was still working with Secretary Mercado as one of his speechwriters at that time. Fresh from De La Salle University, I was recruited to the Defense Department to help Secretary Mercado in the defense. So that's it. And regarding your first question, this is the good thing about the current relationship between the Philippines and China. The channels of communications are open, unlike in the past where channels of communications were closed. But now channels of communications were open at all levels: defense, foreign ministry, and office of the president, and even a lot of back channeling, including me. Yes. We were involved in the back channeling discussion. You at the height of the Second Thomas Shoal incident, I was communicating directly with my counterparts in China, advising their government also, and I made them known that what China did will have tremendous implications for Philippines-China relations and will also risk the international image of China. So because of that, because of those channels of communications, China listened to us and assured our government that in the second resupply mission that their activities will no longer be interrupted. And at the same time, also, there was international pressure. The European Union released a statement, the United States released a statement, Japan released a statement, and many other members of the international community released a statement. And even within ASEAN, quietly, part of quiet diplomacy, ASEAN member states also expressed concern about the recent Second Thomas Shoal incident. And for China, they considered the Second Thomas Shoal incident as if it will be blown out of proportion, will derail China's efforts to establish very good relations with ASEAN members, especially that the two parties are holding their special meeting and also planning to conclude the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea by 2022, just in time for the 20th anniversary of the signing of the declaration of the declaration of the conduct of parties in the South China Sea. So it was a combination of all factors, but I think one thing that contributed to that change of behavior of China was in fact the success of diplomatic actions. It was a success story of diplomacy.
I would agree.
Yes,
I would agree.
We have we have a comment here that's also related from our senior researcher from Singapore, Dr. Henry Chan. He made a comment, and the experts can chime in also. There is an observation that the 1987 Philippine Constitution mixed up 12 nautical miles territorial water with the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. How will this expansion of territorial water definition affect the peaceful settlement of the territorial dispute? Any of the expert, Mr. George, Professor Bush, if you want to chime in also.
Well, I'm not an expert at that. I will leave it to Mr. Rommel and Anna. But I wanted to comment as regards the Ayungin incident. It's definitely a triumph of the diplomatic channels, because if it were not for diplomacy, China doesn't really care what the US and EU and the Philippines declares. The fact is, for instance, that with all those protests and negotiations, without the negotiations, they just ignored letting the Philippine fishermen go in during the Scarborough incident, the standoff. Whereas, for after that, when there was a negotiation diplomatically, then there was a stand down and the fishermen became free to fish again. Actually, in that negotiation in the arbitration committee, the one that was brought up, it had been brought up before that China was willing to give a lot more concessions and discussions and leeway if it had not been brought to international court. And it had been brought up, and it is in the congressional records, senatorial records in the inquiries, that it was informed to Pinoy, and President Pinoy never denied that. And when it was brought up by Trillanes that we will achieve more, and he had removed already 97 boats from the area of conflict, and then it was Del Rosario, Secretary Del Rosario of DFA, who decided to, despite the success already of the 97 boats or so and leaving 3 boats left, at the last stage he decided to go international and bring it to the US, and then that stopped the negotiation and the withdrawal of the boats. No, so just pointing out that sometimes it is very clear that the moment you megaphone it, the options are removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rommel. Dr. Anna, on the constitutional interpretation or reading.
So let me answer that, Austin, for the sake of our students who are here, and also for media who might not have encountered this issue. So first, there are 2 sources of the definition of Philippine territories. First, in accordance with international law, and second, in accordance with the 1987 Philippine Constitution. And in accordance with international law, we have the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea that entitles the Philippines to have 12 nautical miles territorial waters. Okay? And also 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zones, and another extension of the continental shelf, especially under the principle of archipelagic state. So that's the waters. These are territorial waters that are identified under international law. If you will measure, it's only 12 nautical miles. In the 12 nautical miles, you have sovereignty and sovereign control of the 12 nautical miles. But in the 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone, the law only entitles you a sovereign right, but not sovereignty. But in the sovereign rights, you have the exclusive rights to conduct all types of activities in that area. So that's according to international law. However, in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, we have a provision there defining all these territorial waters and all these waters, territories in the skies and in the land as part of our national territory. But it's not very clear whether this national territory involves not only sovereign rights, but also territorial waters. But as far as our constitution is concerned, we regard the Kalayaan Island Group as part of our national territory. So it's not only a claim over waters, but a claim over territories. We're not only claiming waters. Under international law, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea only talks about waters. But in our constitution, it also talks about land. And as part of our constitution, we identify all land features within the Kalayaan Island Group as part of our national territory.
Yes, I think I think the same answer, but I think also what the Philippine government should do as a homework is to establish or to create a legislative measure trying to identify the baselines or baseline of the Philippines, so that would to certain extent help us determine kung asan nga ba, where is really our what you call sovereign territory and what is our sovereign right. So I think the baseline law is needed, but we don't have it yet. So that's just to complement what Dr. Banlaoi have explained so far.
Just a clarification pala, Anna. Anna, in 2009, we passed the archipelagic baseline law. So we have the archipelagic baseline law. What we don't have right now is our law that will specify our maritime zones.
Yes,
and
yes.
Archipelagic archipelagic waters law, yung archipelagic doctrine to apply the concept of archipelagic doctrine. So we already have the 2009 archipelagic baseline law, but what we need is to pass a law that will define our maritime zones and also define our archipelagic sea lanes in the South China Sea. Pending pa yun, hindi na prioritize under the current Congress. But those are the two pending bills that we also need to legislate. Pero sa tingin ko, baka the next presidency na yan ma-discuss.
Yeah,
may I bring out
sorry. Yeah.
A question to either or both of you. That the Philippines has not yet defined or applied, aside from domestic law, our boundaries and territories where international law is concerned. So what we keep talking about, our sovereign territory, in actuality has not been defined and accepted by international standards of application. Maybe you can give us a little enlightenment on this.
Yeah, so sana pala may lawyer tayo dito because that's a legal matter. Pero
yes,
we need another action for that to really to make our claim of national territory consistent with existing international law. So we need to submit something to International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea to define the extent of our maritime zone. Yung ano ba yung 12 nautical miles, ano ba yung 200,000 nautical miles exclusive economic zone, and even continental shelf na-clarify na yan in our claim sa Benham Rice. So we have the nod of the International Tribunal about our claims sa Benham Rice, but in our claims sa West Philippine Sea, hindi pa talaga na clarify gusto yan under international law. But I would like also to stress to our audience that when we talk about West Philippine Sea, it is composed of three major waters. One water in the West Philippine Sea is the Luzon Strait, the Luzon Strait, and the second water is the Scarborough Shoal, waters around Scarborough Shoal, and the third water is the waters around Kalayaan Island Group. Kaya when we talk about West Philippine Sea, we are talking about these three waters. What is being contested right now between China and the Philippines in the case of the Scarborough Shoal is bilateral waters around Scarborough Shoal, and in the Spratlys is waters around the West Philippine Sea. There are other claimants there. So, but in our existing law, we have the Presidential Decree 1759. Basta under President Marcos, we define the extent of Kalayaan Island Group, but we still need to submit to the International Tribunal all our existing claims to have some final ruling, the way we did in our claim in the Benham Rice.
Okay, thank you very much. I agree with Dr. Rommel, the topic actually becomes very rich, and most of these for our educators, most of these insights are not yet in our textbook, so we're getting first-hand account, and we hope that we can also continue our engagement and information sharing with our friends here.